Welcome to the Quartermaster Intelligence Briefing, conversations with nonprofit industry experts, software innovators, and fundraising leaders, helping you navigate the technology landscape for your nonprofit organization. You have a mission to do, and at Quartermaster, we're here to help you accomplish it. I'm your host, Sam Kirk from Quartermaster and the Q Intel community. My guest today is Matt Hussey. Matt is the founder of GenerosityX, a fundraising agency that is dedicated to helping charities grow. I am really looking forward to discussing with him where to start using your donor and donation data to build better relationships and to steward your financial supporters. Matt started GenerosityX in 2023, and it was after several years working for some other agencies, fundraising agencies, and he's building up a really great team that is doing some really great fundraising work. Between GenerosityX and the other places he's worked, Matt has helped raise millions of dollars for organizations through their annual giving programs. He also comes from a family of fundraisers. So it was like he was almost destined to do this work. But because in addition to his own agency, he's helped found the Transform Your Fundraising online learning community with his brother Dan Hussey of Hussey Philanthropic, which is a major giving fundraising consultancy. I really couldn't be more thrilled to have this conversation with Matt. Matt's a great friend, but also like I said before, he's just doing really great work, and he's just building up a really great team with people like Becca and some of the others that are working in the company, and they are starting to make some real waves in the work that they're doing, and I just could not be more proud of what Matt's doing, and I can't wait to have this conversation with him today. So let's get started with today's briefing. With me is Matt Hussey from GenerosityX, which is a fundraising agency that helps charities grow. And Matt, welcome to the Quartermaster Intelligence Briefing. It's really good to have you here.
Thanks, Sam. It's great to see you. This is great.
I know. Some people would know, but a lot of you probably wouldn't know. But like Matt and I, we had the privilege of working together for a period of time, and we worked at another agency, and got to work as we were heading up we were running the strategy team, and Matt was one of the senior strategists there, and it was a lot of I got to know Matt through that, and it's just been a privilege to be able to be connected with him for the last few years. And now with his new agency that he started just a little over how long ago?
About a year and 8 months, probably.
Okay. Yeah, almost 2 years ago. Okay. Yeah. And then over the last year, we've had the privilege to be able to kind of do some work together between Quartermaster and GenerosityX, and and also to his team like Becca and some of the others. So it's anyway, just great to have you here, Matt.
Thanks, Sam. It's great to have you here, or great to be here, pardon me. And it's funny, for the viewers, Sam's actually my old boss. He was too nice to, put it that way. He's like, we used to work together.
We used to work together.
Sam was a mentor and a coach and a great old boss of mine. So I wouldn't be here without you, my friend. So we'll give you credit where credit's due, right? You deserve your flowers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and Matt was one of my senior strategists, and it was just like a pleasure to watch him. It was a pleasure to watch you work, man. Because I get a chance to sometimes sit in on your calls, watch how you sort of worked with clients, worked how you like how you would do the work outside of working with them on strategy and coming back to them with hey, we're thinking about this, we would do that, and so knowing that, it gives me a picture of how you worked probably today with your team, with your own company, and so I would highly recommend. If you're looking for an agency, Matt's your man. So,
And there we go. And we're done.
Okay, wrap it up. No, what we wanted to talk today is so Matt and I were talking, and I was like, hey, I'd really like to do something with you guys. But one of the things that came up for me was I was having a conversation with a client, and he goes, you know what? I actually really I don't even know where to start when trying to use my data in my CRM. What do I do? And I was like, it really brought me short, because I think there's this thing where it's hey, we're all in this fundraising thing, and we all hear terms about hey, we're going to segment our donors, and we'll send it to our longtime ones, or maybe you segment out to your major donors or your mid-level or your monthlies or whatever. But even how do you approach that? There's people that are super experienced at this, and then a lot of people who get into fundraising by accident, you could you talk to 8 out of 10 fundraising professionals, and 8 of them will definitely say, I never meant to be here. How do they go about like even knowing how to use their data well and take it from their CRM and turn that into something actionable? And so it just really got me thinking about this, and I was like, I'm going to talk to Matt. And so I thought, like, from your perspective, as you're doing this with clients, I just kind of thought, well, why don't we just start at the beginning? Let's just start at like a 101-ish of like, let's just start ground floor and say, hey, this is what you need to do. Because you probably encounter this with some of your clients that come in at different stages of their development. So that's kind of how I wanted to approach this one, was just talk about like, where do you even start when you want to even use your data to steward donors, ask them for more, ask them again, whatnot.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I think it's funny, right? I think if you go on Google and you go, I want to segment my donors, or I want to do, data, be, data driven, any of these words, they're kind of buzz terms, or they can be, where it's just
right,
like,
exactly.
Cool, here's about 1 million search results from primarily all these great tech companies that many of whom I, really appreciate and I think are wonderful in the space, but there's just almost like an overload of information, and the depth of which you can apply it within your particular organization becomes challenging, where it's like, yep, segment your donors. That's great. It's okay. I kind of needed a little bit more than that. I also think we make it a little too complicated.
Yeah.
And in the sense of, or at least maybe to begin. And it's like, okay, you got to do all this data segmentation, create all these different versions. I think if you're thinking about this and it feels overwhelming, my first and foremost, my encouragement would be strip it back and go back to, and kind of make it as simple as possible. And we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you're already doing this, then there's probably an opportunity to go further, because technology is making it easier and easier for any one of us to get personalized communication. That's not to say we didn't like personalized communication before. It's just all these technology companies are making it easier for us to get that.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of silly for me to really care about an email that doesn't say "Dear Matt," right? We've got like "Dear F name" has become so common, and it is personalization, but the value in which we feel like it actually is personalized is really low, just because everybody can do that, right? That's kind of sort of the floor.
Well, and on the flip side, if it says "Dear friend," and you're like, what? Like, it almost becomes like you couldn't figure out my name, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of like, okay, that's now the bare minimum. You could argue the basement, not even the ground floor. And what I think about is, okay, if you've never done segmentation before, you don't really know how to personalize content. If I was going to tell you, I was going to have a random meeting. I was going to kind of pick a donor from your database, and you were going to have to meet with them tomorrow for coffee. And you could find out maybe like 10 things about them. What would be like the first things, and listed in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way through 10, that you'd want to know first? And, we'll maybe give you the basics, right? Their names, all those sorts of things. But then you'd probably go, well, how long have they been a donor? What was their biggest gift? What was their first gift? Have they ever made a gift that's a tribute donation? Are they a monthly donor? You'd probably begin asking yourself, okay, what would I really want to know so I don't look like silly in front of this person? And in your marketing,
like they would feel like them.
Yeah. And
right? Like you go through the data and you're like, man, you've been here since X date, and they're like, oh god, yeah, that's right. Wow, I didn't realize it had been 20 years or whatever the number is. And like, but they feel seen, they feel known because you knew that information about them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I would say is, if you could begin to kind of imagine it in the context of meeting with a donor one-on-one, the most personalized, human-to-human, one-to-one experience you could have with a donor. I mean, just speaking generally, but kind of one of the best ways you could connect with a donor. How would you want to mirror that or replicate that on a mass marketing level? So it's like, well, I would want to know if they're a monthly donor. That's the donors who give monthly. We really value them, because not having to worry about the cash flow, just somebody who's willing to commit month in, month out to support us. That's really important to us. So I'd want to talk to that donor if I was sitting down with them, having a cup of coffee or tea,
Right.
in a way where I recognize and let them be seen in that way. Great. That's probably a really valuable segment to focus on. And technology, in those articles you Google, like they'll kind of go monthly donors, this and that. But I personally think in order to make the communication as authentic as possible, it's not to say there wouldn't be overlap between that, that blog post and how you would view it. But if you just think about the things you would want to kind of show that donor, the ways in which you'd want them to feel seen, starting with that will make your marketing way better, because when you go to write that email, to write that direct mail letter, that Facebook post or message, whatever, I think you'll just be able to tap into that so much more. So like one thing we do a lot of that previously in like other kind of fundraising or marketing roles that I didn't do a whole lot about or just didn't really think about it was actually tribute donations. If you look at segments, tribute donations, I think generally speaking, this is more anecdotal, can be overlooked around like monthly donors, frequent donors, lapsed donors, new donors. And for me, actually, tribute donations, if somebody's most recent donation was a tribute donation, again, if I was going to sit down with that donor over a cup of coffee, you better be sure I would really want to know if their last donation was in memory of somebody or their first donation. So we actually do a lot of segmentation or think through segmentation, both print and digitally, around tribute donors, because I think that, and there's a question here of like, how big is that group? If it's 5 donors, okay, where are you putting your energy into? Sure. Of course matters.
Yeah.
But when I just go back to that example of, okay, if I'm going to sit down with a donor, or if I'm going to, think through how I'd want my, a client that we work with to communicate with, a donor on a one-to-one basis, in-memory donations are really, really important to us because it's such a unique way to give. So we do a lot of personalization around that. And that's not to say, and that isn't really from like what we've read or seen other people do. That was actually kind of self-discovered through just my own personal experience of loss and grief and applying that into my work life.
Yeah.
But I think if you just think through, okay, if I'm going to sit down with a donor, what would I really want to know? And if you just list that in the priority of the things you would look for first, I think that begins to peel back, not necessarily, the segmentation, the rights and wrongs, but kind of how to make it authentic and real for you.
Yeah.
And again, technology is making it easier to personalize communication to donors. So what does personalization look like to you in the most authentic, real way? And if you start there, I think that will begin to peel back kind of cool. Okay, maybe I'll pull a list of our monthly donors because, wow, we really value them. Maybe, we care a lot. We're a health-based organization. We're a hospice. We're not a huge organization, but wow, in-memory donations is something that's really a big portion of our base. We want to make sure when somebody makes an in-memory donation, the next time we ask them for money, we want to make sure we acknowledge and respect the last time they gave was something really, really powerful. And we don't want to be ignorant or blind to that. We actually want to be respectful and caring, and maybe use that as momentum for that donor to continue on that kind of deep, meaningful moment that they experienced previously. So for me, I think it just starts with that. And I think just thinking about it on a one-to-one basis, what would you want to know if you were going to meet with somebody in person, allows you to replicate that at the mass level.
Yeah, that's so important, especially it's so funny because I'm just thinking, I was like, man, have I overlooked like the tribute or in memory sort of gifts? And sometimes like when I was like working at charity, I don't know if I often would put in the field. I think it was there, like it would be there in the forms we were using, which were not great forms, but in hindsight, but it'd be like, okay, fine, if someone wants to put an in tribute, that's fine, sort of thing. But actually, like, the more now that I've grown, and I think it's the same, like what you were saying, just as you've gone through your own personal experience of what putting something in someone's memory. It's like I recently, not that long ago, I had a good friend pass away quite tragically, and they gave, the family said, hey, here's where we want, if you want to make a gift, go here. And some of those like organizations I had either never heard of before, or I'd heard of them but never given to. And if I was to put in like a significant gift in there, and if someone just thought it came out of the blue and was like, wow, look at the goodness of Sam's heart, that was really nice of the Sam Kirk guy to give us that gift. But it's actually, no. I gave it because I was actually I was thinking not about you, organization. I was actually thinking about my friend. And that becomes just a way different, and if someone doesn't acknowledge that for me, in that circumstance, like that would be one of those sort of like, do you actually care about me? And that's really like, the classic sort of like, those, I don't know what the names for those phrases where it's like they go one way and then you turn around and they go the other way, almost palindromic phrases, but it's like, I don't care what you know until I know that you care. Like there's that really is that, I think that applies so much in annual giving and in any of these things that we ask people to give to. It's like until the donor feels like you care about them, it's sort of like, well, I gave you the gift, but I don't really have any, like, it's why reporting back is so important. It's why all those things become so important, because otherwise it's like, great, thanks for giving, thanks for saying thank you to me, but like I don't really feel like you knew me or that you cared about me, the donor. And I think that becomes like those tribute things. I just hadn't really thought about that being quite so. It almost becomes your leadoff thing to look at.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because I think the interesting thing with segmentation is, what I always ask myself is, even for our organizations with really big donor files, there is sort of this question of like, when does it become not worth it? And I think that's why kind of even just listing it out and breaking it out allows you to help clarify what the priorities are, because you might not want to prioritize every segment. And I think that's really important. I think also because, again, going back to that point of technology is making it easier for any one of us to get personalized, unique information that's tailored to our interests, beliefs, values, all those sorts of wonderful things, right? Digital advertising, that's a great example of that, of just, Facebooks and Googles of the world know a whole lot about us. What I also think that means is just knowing that when you don't do that, the challenging part with all of this is, well, let's not worry about that. There's points where you probably don't need to worry about it. This is where it's a nuanced answer. When I wish I could just say, I wish it was black and white.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is knowing that if you don't think about segmentation, if you don't think about personalization or how to make things more unique and tailored to a donor's interests, behaviors, whatever the case may be, it's easier for us to tone it out. Because again, thinking of just, we're recording this December 2nd. Tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. I'm going to get a ton of emails in my inbox, both because I subscribe to a lot of emails, and also for any organization I've ever given to before, I'm going to probably get an email from them. And it's kind of a question of, okay, for the donors who already have a strong affinity with you, you might not need to go above and beyond to make it really bespoke and talk to them in a certain way, right? But there's going to be certain groups where, particularly those new donors, I think that's where personalization matters a lot. I know the Nathan Hills of the world, I imagine yourself, me, and lots of other really kind of way smarter fundraisers than myself talk a lot about new donor welcome series. So when somebody's a new donor, how do we want to capitalize off that moment? And I think it's just kind of knowing, if you don't do that, it's easier for an email and easier to ignore an email, easier to ignore a marketing message, just because as more and more noise is in the space, and as humans, that's caused us to have less and less of an attention span. If you lack the personalization that is kind of needed for me to even care a little bit in order to engage further, it makes it a whole lot harder to grow your fundraising programs.
30 years ago when, we weren't getting things by email, and, it was like, it's either sitting on TV, it's in a newspaper ad, or some sort of insert, or some sort of direct mail that you're being acquired. It's like, if it doesn't say Dear Sam on it, I can forgive him for it, because, well, how would they know who I am? But now, it's like you say, like, the data is so ubiquitous, whether it's like through social media or like whatever, it's like almost doesn't feel like there's any excuse for us to not have that information, or it just shows like how important it becomes to make sure that's there. So
yeah.
And
I think that's why when it's like, whoa, that feels overwhelming, the best thing you can do is like, okay, if I was going to meet with the donor tomorrow, what would I want to know so that I could help them feel seen? And what do I think would be the most powerful ways I'd want them, for me to see them, or for them to feel that acknowledgement? Okay, I'd probably look for these 10 things. And if you start there, that'll give you pretty much your query to use in a CRM or to use in a digital online giving tool or whatever. to allow you to kind of pull a list to hopefully then personalize content a little bit more.
Okay. So you're talking like, let's just I'm going to say more sophisticated organizations probably have this down decently well. Although I think we both probably have stories of shocking finding out like larger organizations. You're like, really? You don't do this? Like, it's actually almost shocking how unsophisticated sometimes some organizations can be. But let's make some assumptions that a larger organization is, they're pretty good at this. Like, they're all right at this. Or they've got an agency that they're working with that's actively in their data doing the work for them, right, to pull out the stuff. But if you're like a small to mid-size org that's like, a few people, small shop, as some people like to call it, like, okay, so you make this list. Where would you kind of like, trying to think, let's just put it in some concrete terms. Okay, so we want to make 10 items. Where would you kind of start? So like, it's like, the tribute, and then where would you kind of go from there? Is it, we start using the terms like RFM, RFV? Like, do we need that recency, frequency, monetary value? Is that the kinds of things that you'd be looking for? Or maybe break that down for us a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a great question around RFM, and I'll kind of break it up into two parts where we think through personalization, or like creating versions of like, how do we want to talk to people when we know we're going to market to them or communicate with them or try to strengthen a relationship with them, versus like RFM of kind of like, who do we know who to include, or kind of how do we decide who's worthwhile, and kind of that idea of how to sort of pick and rank your donors so you have some clarity on who is more valuable from a dollars and cents point of view. They're all humans deserving of happiness and all these sorts of wonderful things. But to put an algorithm on it, or not an algorithm, but a calculation on it. So I'll start with the personalization. What's interesting is a lot of times we send marketing campaigns out based off seasonality or things happening on the macro lens, right? It's the holidays, it's Giving Tuesday. We're going to run a campaign and we're going to reach out to people. And what's ironic is that is a decision around the seasonality that's kind of irrespective of the individual donor.
Sure.
We're just working with the assumption that it's the holidays, it's year end, we should be communicating with people. And then if you're a smaller organization, you might be thinking, well, maybe let's do a monthly donor version and a general version and a lapsed version and a new version. And that is what the bigger organizations, especially those with big volumes of donor files, would do. It's not to say that's a bad thing, but what's interesting is that's actually how you went about that campaign is irrespective of the individual donor, right? It's a macro decision around it's year end, so we're going to focus on having things out in market. And that's a good decision. I'm not telling you not to fundraise around the holidays by any means. Full disclosure, disclaimer, don't you keep with
definitely do that. Yeah, that's right. There's reasons why we all do it at these times of year. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But when I think about, okay, how would you want to think through segmentation or personalization? What's more unique is how can you use technology in your favor so that you reach people when they do something on the micro level. Somebody made a gift for the first time. So if you look up New Donor Welcome Series, there's a lot of great content around that, because when somebody becomes a new donor, regardless of if it's January 1st or December 31st, or if it's July 19th, that's a pretty powerful first step somebody just took for your organization. And regardless of when they gave, you'd probably want to talk to them, communicate with them, begin to build a relationship with them, irrespective of the season. You just gave your first gift. I'm not here to wish you, a Merry Christmas or a Happy Summer. I'm just here to say you did something amazing, and I want to let you know the ways in which your gift makes a difference. That's why New Donor Welcome Series.
Here's the impact that you were having, and let me tell you a story about someone who, or whatever, right? Like, you're giving them the entrance in and showing them, how they're making a difference. Totally.
And that's where I would start if you're a smaller shop. If you're like, okay, I've identified my 10 things, monthly donors, if they're a new donor, and let's maybe use tribute donors. How can you build systems? I don't even necessarily think it needs to be an email campaign per se, but how can you build a system of how you'd want to reach out to that donor and communicate with them based off that behavioral based marketing versus, season or annual giving, kind of annual calendar kind of based marketing. So if they're a new donor, maybe we send them a New Donor Welcome Series. If they are a new monthly donor, maybe we send them a package to say, you're amazing. Welcome to the monthly donor program name. And here's some cool things about how a gift month in, month out makes a difference. And then maybe you'd build things into your system, like we send a quarterly update email once a quarter, just if you're a monthly donor, to kind of share the extra special ways your gift made a difference. And then the last thing might be a tribute donor. Maybe you just want to call that to them and say, wow, like you just made a gift, especially if an in mem, right? Like where it might, oh, that carries a lot of weight. And I just want to say, wow, like thanks for just honoring a loved one that way. Do you mind if I ask you to share a little bit about them and what inspired that gift, right? You can just imagine having that call with that donor and probably both of you just weeping on the phone together. And while it'd be, there'd be some weight to that, you'd create probably a moment for a donor that'd be irreplaceable compared to adding a paragraph on an email or a direct mail letter at the end of the year. It's not to say you shouldn't do that. It's just a matter if you're a smaller shop, if you can think about things based off behaviorally, one, it'll give it a longer shelf life. This won't last 1 year end. A new donor welcome series could last you years, right? It's like, oh, this could have a long shelf life. If you develop great processes for tribute donors or monthly donors, the nice thing is that we'll have kind of legs beyond just a few months. And I think if you just think through, okay, what would I want to know? And then how can I build this into our strategy, our systems, our email marketing tools, if we're thinking through an automation, so that it lasts and it's kind of effective all year. I think that's where I would say to start there. And then if you think of RFM, RFM is a helpful tool around deciding who to mail and who not to mail. And if you're a smaller organization, there's ways you can do RFM yourself. Actually, Keela, a CRM, has a free RFM tool you can download.
Right.
It's just a Google sheet. So that's what I would say is if you're like, how do I do calculations? All RFM is it's a weighted calculation. So it's like, okay, we don't want to think through who to mail or who not to mail, maybe to use a direct mail analogy, based off if they make a big gift. Because what if they made that big gift 25 years ago, right? They're not maybe likely to give again. So RFM typically is weighted so that recency has the most weight. Are they a recent donor? Are they not lapsed? And if that's true, we want to probably include them, and that's going to be a very important decision, more so than how much they gave. Did they give at any point recently? Frequency.
And by recently, we mean like within the last 1 to 12 months, right? Like it's like, or yeah.
So not, did they give in the last month? Oh, and if they didn't, we don't want to include them, right? Fundraising, very annual-based program. So if they've given in the last, year, oh my goodness, they're a 5 out of 5. If we kind of weight it that way. If they've given in the last 2 years, okay, 4 out of 5, still great. They're still kind of recent, maybe 3 years, and then 4 years, and then over 5 years. It's like, okay, that's probably where we need to begin thinking through, is it worthwhile still trying to bring this donor back when it's been 5 years and we haven't had much luck? Frequency, if they give often, right? If they give a couple times per year, maybe they're more likely to give in the summer than somebody who doesn't give frequently throughout the year. And then monetary is usually weighted last. So recency is the most important. Frequency is pretty important. Maybe like this is 6 out of your, if you think about a weighted calculation, this is maybe 6 points out of the 10. Frequency might be 3 out of the 10, and then monetary might be 1, just because if they haven't given, even if they've given big amounts, that's obviously very valuable, but maybe it's been
like you say, if it was 25 years ago, that doesn't carry as much weight as someone who gave $100 yesterday, like, right? Or a month ago or 3 months ago kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's a helpful tool, especially if you have a lot of people and you're an older organization where you're like, I only have enough money to mail 1,000 people. Who should I mail?
Yeah.
Kayla is a free tool. If you're not sure or don't feel comfortable with that, maybe level of kind of complexity, what you can also just do is focus on recency. The vast majority of times when RFM is used, recency is by far the most important weight in that calculation. Because you want to focus on people who remember giving to you. It's been somewhat recent since they gave. And that'd be my kind of advice as well.
Yeah.
It's only really appropriate or makes sense if you have a lot of donors that you kind of need a cutoff point. If you're a smaller organization, what I would say is finding ways to re-engage with lapsed donors so that they know that when they gave, they made a difference and you've missed them, right? A lot of lapsed donors, we do surveys sometimes, and one of the things we most commonly see is we'll ask donors in more sophisticated ways than this. Do you see yourself as a lapsed donor? Are you still a donor to this organization?
Right.
Again, we'll ask it in more sophisticated
Yeah,
ways
well,
than
even
that.
if I gave my last gift was 2 years ago, if I still feel like I'm connected, just because I didn't give doesn't mean that I don't feel as a donor that I still have an affinity for that organization. Now, definitely a lapsed donor if I haven't given in 2 years, but I
Well,
I
exactly.
still might consider myself to be a supporter of that organization, even if I haven't given in 24 months.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the main thing to remember with lapse is we look in databases and we look, oh man, it's been 2 years since they gave.
Oh, yeah.
For a lot of people, they probably feel like it's been more recent than that. So I think the
Sure.
main thing to remember with
Was
lapsed
that
donors
yesterday?
is
Yeah. Yeah.
don't give up
Yeah.
on them. Let them know that when they gave, they made a difference. And you can even just say, hey, we saw your last gift was 2 years ago, and when you gave, it made a really big difference. And we really miss your support. When you gave it was really important to us. And we just want to say, is there anything you would need to see from our organization, or has your situation changed? Of course, when somebody's on a pension, they can't give what they gave before. We always want to be respectful, especially given generosity. To be philanthropic is a very personal kind of major kind of decision. So I wouldn't want a donor to feel like we're treating them like an ATM. But a lot of times, to your point, Sam, I gave 2 years ago. I probably thought it was more recent than that. Wasn't COVID last year? Oh, 2020 was 5 years ago nearly.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow, time does fly. Didn't I just buy this t-shirt? No, you've had it for 10 years. It's time to get a new wardrobe, right? All these things, life happens. And I think first and foremost, being empathetic to donors and also being courageous enough to ask them again for their support, because it probably feels a bigger deal to you than it does to the donor. That's not to say that's always the case, but that's kind of, I think, it's easy to live in fear. Sam, you and I were just talking about this and having a nice therapy session before our
that's true.
call here.
Yeah, no, and it's so true. I mean, I think with those lapsed donors, it's sort of like it would be easy to just kind of take your, I don't know, like if I wrote a letter or an email to some people and said, dear Matt, here's my here's the challenge we have. If you give this gift, we can do this, and it will change this, and so therefore please would you consider giving, go to this link and give. There's an appeal, classic appeal. But if I think a lot of times I think back in my history of working in charities where it was sort of like, oh well, I'll just do a version of that for my lapsed donors and just say, well, they'll, when you gave in the past, it's like, but using things like those data points in that maybe in your CRM, which is sort of like, okay, when was the last time Matt gave? Oh, that was 18 months ago. I could put that. You could actually put that date in there. But even changing the message from not just asking for the gift, but actually saying, what would I actually was really struck by that thing that you said was like, what would you need for information from me to help you feel like you could give again? Or what would make you feel like you could re-engage, at a greater level with us as an organization, and kind of like saying, if you want to give, fine, but also here's my phone number, here's my email address, or that kind of thing, and it actually gives people a way to feel like they're not an ATM, and that's a way of using data points to foster relationship, which is really interesting.
Yeah,
right. Because at the end of the day, that's all this is. That's all this data is for, is to foster a relationship.
And that's why I break it down with the coffee shop example. Maybe to kind of round us out here, because I know we're running out of time.
Sure.
If you were going to walk into a room and talk with this person, how would you act that it would feel authentic and true to you? Kind of as a spokesperson of the organization, whether you're a fundraiser, even if you're writing on behalf of somebody else, right? You're probably framing it in a way that feels authentic to the organization or the leader of the organization, or if you're that major gifts officer, or if you're the executive director, CEO, or you're on the board, and this is a volunteer-run organization, what would you want to know if you were going to walk into a room and sit down with a donor and have coffee with them? Well, if they hadn't given 18 months ago, I probably just wouldn't badger them for money. I'd be like, hey, we know it's been a little while since you gave. You'd probably ask smart questions and help them feel like a human. Or you'd probably say, when you gave, it made a really big difference. I don't know if we ever told you that. You'd probably want to feel authentic and loving and kind, and probably spark a sort of environment that's true to that donor. And
Yeah.
what's great is, again, it's probably going to be scarier for you as the person asking than it would be for the person, we're solicited to all the time, whether for fundraising or way more often for many other things. Wayfair has been texting me like crazy, telling me all about all the furniture discounts I can get. They're not caring about whether I like it or not. And thankfully, fundraising is more relationally based. It's not to say that it's the same, but it is sort of to just acknowledge the solicitations we get in other contexts. And if you just thought about connecting with that donor, sitting with them and having a coffee, and if you strip it back to that of like, well, I probably want to know when they last gave. Cool. If that's a data point you would want to have in that conversation, it's a data point you can deploy in an email, in a letter, in any sort of context. And I think if you think about it that way, it makes it a whole lot less scary and a whole lot more practical.
Yeah, from a technical perspective, because like that's what Quartermaster does is like, well, we work with people on the tech stack. So here's Matt telling us from, talking to us from that agency side, from that, how would you communicate with your donors and how would you use data to do better communication? From the tech side, of course, every CRM is very different. The querying tools or the report tools or whatever you want to call it, the search tools, all vary within these ones. But the things you probably can do is say like, when was the most recent gift? And you can do a time frame and go, okay, 12 months. And you're going to get a list. And that could be, depending on the size of your shop, that could be, a few hundred to several thousand, depending on the size of your organization. And it's like, and then I think that's where it really feels like what, so now where do you go from there? And I think that's like everything that you said, Matt, just to summarize this all up, is it's sort of like you're going into those things like, what are the, actually, I think a term that I think you and I texted once was like, what are the nuggets that you would kind of, the information that you'd want to use? And it'd be like, what was a tribute? Did they give a tribute? Oh man. Oh yeah. Okay. Let's just parcel those. Let's just kind of separate those people off. We segmented. It's not that complicated. It's just, we kind of pulled those people off to the one side. Okay. Now we know people that gave as part of a tribute. Oh, okay. They gave to this one particular appeal. Oh, that's interesting. You might want to kind of pull those ones off to just one side. And it's just helping you to just very practically go through, or things like, when was their anniversary? Like, you can use these things not just for asking for money, but also like, if you know some information's about like, oh, hey, we knew when their birthdays were, or they have an anniversary for their, for a wedding or something, or when was the last time, when was the first celebrating the day of the gift, their very first gift. It's been 10 years and you've been giving every year or whatever. It's like, you're just taking those things and just using those to try to better understand, like say that I understand you and I hear you and I see you, donor. And, we just want to share back with you all these great things. And would you also consider giving again? And just through that, it's like, that's what we do as friends, right? Like Matt, like, you're my friend. We talk. I see how you're doing. You're like, well, that's worth me investing in, and you give back to me, and we talk, and then also that's like we have a relationship. And if suddenly I said, Matt, I need you to help me move my house one day, you'd be like, yeah, what day are we doing it? Versus if I just ran up to someone on the street and just said, I hear you have a truck, will you help me move? They're gonna like go, no, I don't know you. It's like, and I think that's what we can get from just starting at these simple spots with data. And I think that's just the exciting part here. Now, obviously every CRM is a little bit different in how you do it. And then what do you do with these lists afterwards? There's definitely more we could talk about, but I think, this is a great starting point, Matt. I don't know if there's anything else you want to kind of just button it up with related to this.
No, I think that's great. My dad was also a fundraising consultant, and he always talked about how can we treat donors like friends, and that's kind of, I think, summarizes a lot of what you said, Sam. So well done.
Cool, I love it. Matt Hussey is the founder of GenerosityX. Matt, tell people where they can get in touch with you and find out more about you and more about GenerosityX.
Well, I live in Calgary, so if you want to try to find me on the streets here, you're welcome to. I walk to work nicer or Red Mile most days. But if you don't have too much luck trying to find me on the streets, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think Sam can make sure my LinkedIn profile is in the show notes. And if you want to learn a little bit more about GenerosityX, head to generosityx.com, or you can send us an email at hello@generosityx.com. And yeah, we'd love to share all the ways we love thinking about ways we can be friends with donors. So feel free to connect with me on any of those sorts of mediums.
Fantastic. No doubt we'll have other conversations on here, Matt, because I think there's probably more we could have gotten into, but we'll keep it here. Such a pleasure to have you here, and I just get so excited when I see the work that you've done, and what you've done is you've started GeneracityX over the last almost 2 years, and so I'm just a pleasure to have you here with us and talking, and I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Can't wait. Thanks, Sam.
All right,
man.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments for me, you can go to our show notes for all the links. Our email, though, is podcast@qmaster.io. That's podcast@qmaster.io. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and you can go to Quartermaster's website, qmaster.io, qmaster.io, to find out more about our services and how you can also join the Q Intel community, and I hope to see you there. So we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Quartermaster Intelligence Briefing.